Well, it's an ugly truth in American history. For decades, Native American children attended federally run boarding schools where they were forced to assimilate. A federal investigation has now been launched to look into past abuses. CBS 2's Leslie Marin shows us some of the schools were here in Southern California.
Tucked between homes and a hillside in Riverside sits a small cemetery that tells a painful chapter of American history.
It's very emotional to be here.
65 Native American children are buried at Sherman Indian School Cemetery. All had attended the Sherman Institute, one of more than 350 Native American boarding schools that were run by the federal government from the late 1800s to the 1970s. The goals of this school? Assimilate Native children. As Captain Richard Henry Pratt, who opened the first school, once infamously said, "Kill the Indian in him and save the man."
Anything Indian, anything culture, your language, your hair, your different style of dress was forbidden.
There were once 10 Indian boarding schools here in California. San Bernardino Assembly member James Ramos's grandmother attended St. Boniface Indian Industrial School in Banning.
They were then trying to change their language. They were forbidden to speak their language. They were forbidden to speak anything Indian, but they didn't stop remembering, right? And so they came back to the reservation and kept teaching those things. Others weren't so lucky.
Historians believe students attending the boarding schools were beaten, starved, and abused if they spoke their native language.
So my grandmother, like many others, were raised to believe that being an Indian was a dirty thing and something that shouldn't be talked about ever.
Amanda Wixon is an assistant curator at Sherman School Museum. At the time, laws mandated Native American students attend the boarding schools.
I've heard stories of sometimes just going to a village and see what children are wandering around and saying, they're being unsupervised, we'll take them. I've heard stories of rations being withheld unless they send their children.
Once students arrived at the schools, they were put to work. Academics, Wixon says, was only about 2 hours of a very long day.
They're getting up at 5, they're working till 10, they're as young as 4. And then there was also the very highly controversial outing program, which saw children going out into the local community and working for local white Christian families, for low wages in the interest of civilizing them.
Scholars estimate by 1926, 83% of all Native school children attended the boarding schools. Wixon says it's important to note not all students had harsh experiences.
Some students were able to, leverage their experiences and use some of the things that they learned in terms of like economics and agriculture and all sorts of stuff and go back to their reservations and their communities and make a life for themselves and maybe even sometimes improve the lives of their families.
Although many of the students who died are believed to have contracted deadly diseases, much is still being uncovered about what happened at the schools, including how many of the students struggled under a brutal system.
Those that fought back, those that wanted to retain their language, they were beaten. There was atrocities that happened. And we think that there was beatings that took place so severely that they ended up in the cemeteries with no explanation to the families.
Today, only 4 federally run Native American boarding schools remain in the United States. One is Sherman High School, still in Riverside, but it's undergone a radical transformation.
It became basically one of the few beacons of light that now moves forward educational attainment in the Indian community.
U.S. Interior Secretary Deb Haaland announced a federal investigation into past abuses at the schools, but the brutal history has left a legacy of pain.
Even today in Indian country, we have the highest alcoholism rates, the highest suicide rates, the highest areas of lack of attainment in education. I think it all goes back to the historical trauma that's never came forward to say this truly did happen to our people.
The federal investigation will include using ground-penetrating radar to find out what happened to children who never made it home. And Riverside Sherman Indian Museum has already done a lot of work to compile the stories and experiences of Southern California students and Native families. I'm Leslie Marin, CBS 2 News.